It begins, as most days do, before the bell rings, before the gentry stir in their feather beds, before the chapel candle is lit, before even the cook grumbles her way into the smoky blackness of the kitchen hearth. There is a moment of stillness. That moment belongs to the servants, or rather, it hangs over them like a breath not yet exhaled just before the long day begins. The servants' quarters, if we may be generous with the term, are not in the manor proper. Oh no, that privilege is reserved for the family, and perhaps a favoured lady's maid, or the steward, if he's managed to avoid any recent financial blunders. For the rest, their nights are passed in the cramped annexes, draughty outbuildings, or stone undercrofts. Sometimes above the stables, though only if they've proven they can sleep through the smell. These rooms are not private. Privacy, after all, is a luxury reserved for people who matter. A dozen bodies might be packed into a single low-ceiling space, lying shoulder to shoulder on Russia-stuffed mattresses. Blankets are shared. So are coughs, and snores, and fleas. All things in their own way, part of the household economy. The air in the quarters is thick, musty, sour with sweat and smoke, a scent that clings to the wool of your tunic and the hair on your arms. One gets used to it, though. Eventually it becomes part of you, like the stiffness in your back, or the constant awareness of your station in life. There is no cock crow to wake the servants, not yet. Instead, it is the soft clatter of footsteps on cold stone, the tap of leather soles, the scrape of a bucket against a wall, a body rising slowly from the warmth of sleep to the chill of duty. In one corner, the youngest lad, perhaps 12 years old, perhaps younger if his family needed coin early, rubs sleep from his eyes. His name hardly matters. He will be called Boy for the next 10 years, unless another boy arrives, in which case he will be Elder Boy, and the newcomer New Boy. It is an elegant system, if not particularly imaginative. He has a job to do, several in fact. First, the hearths. The fires have long since died overnight. It is his task to relight them before the nobles rise. The trick is to coax embers back to life without drawing too much breath in. The ashes are fine and punishing to the lungs. He stokes them with care, cursing under his breath when one spits at him. He is quiet, though. Always quiet. Other servants rise and dress. There is no leisurely breakfast, no idle grooming. The morning is not a time for reflection. It is a time for speed. Tunics are pulled over linen shifts. Boots are strapped tight. Hair is tied back or shoved beneath coifs. The garments are thick and coarse, spun from wool so scratchy it might as well be bark. But they are warm, and warmth is a rare and precious thing before dawn. In a manor of wealth, let's say one of middling nobility, the staff may number anywhere from 20 to 50, depending on the season, the family's ambitions, and whether a wedding or a hunting party is on the horizon. Each servant knows their place in the hierarchy. The scullion girl does not presume to speak to the steward. The stable boy does not address the lady's maid unless spoken to. Everyone has a place, and to forget it is to risk being replaced by someone who remembers. At the top of the servant chain, one might find the steward or the housekeeper. They have their own small rooms, perhaps even a key. Their duties are managerial: accounting, inventory, diplomacy with suppliers and visiting officials. But even they rise early. A servant who lies abed past sunrise is a servant who invites suspicion. One girl, Marjorie perhaps, moves quietly past the others. She has been assigned to the solar. where the lady of the house sleeps. It is not a role she asked for, but she was chosen for her quiet tread and her steady hands. She knows better than to speak before being addressed, better than to knock too loudly, better than to look directly at her mistress unless requested. She will lay out garments before the noblewoman wakes, arranging them by the day's activities. Wool if it's damp, fine linen if guests are expected. Jewellery is locked in the chest. She does not touch it. Her fingers are calloused and rough. The ladies are not. Elsewhere the kitchen begins to stir. Bread must be prepared. Porridge must be started. The cook is already swearing by the time the second servant arrives. The kitchen fire is never truly allowed to die, but it needs tending all the same. The air in here is thick with soot and ambition. The cook is not a man to be trifled with. He has served 3 lords, outlasted 2, and has been known to throw knives, though never in anger, only for emphasis. Outside, the sky is still dark. A silver edge begins to form on the eastern horizon, but the sun is not yet up. A bell hangs in the chapel tower, quiet for now. When it rings, it will call the household to life, nobles to prayer, servants to motion. The bell marks the day in sections. Morning prayers, noon meal, evening vigil. The hours are kept not for convenience, but for obedience. For now, though, time is measured in actions. How many pots have been emptied? How many hearths lit? How many steps taken in silence? The manor is a living thing, stone and timber, yes, but also breath, heat, motion. The servants are its blood, moving constantly, invisibly sustaining it. In one hall, the rushes on the floor are replaced. They are strewn with new herbs, marjoram, lavender, or sometimes mint. Not out of kindness, but to mask the smell of previous days. This is a job often given to young girls or older women whose backs are not yet bent fully. They move quickly, eyes downcast, hands full of straw and stem. The sound of the bell comes at last, low and solemn. A call, not a suggestion. The household breathes in. In the chapel, the family will kneel. Nobles in embroidered cloaks, their voices echoing off vaulted stone. The servants will stand at the back, if they are permitted at all. Some pray. Some merely close their eyes and count the minutes. Then the real day begins. There is no fanfare, no chorus, just footsteps, instructions, and the quiet acceptance of repetition. Every morning is like this. Not quite identical, but familiar in its demands. A few servants live for the rhythm. Those who find comfort in duty, purpose in predictability. Others endure it, dreaming of coin, escape, or the faint hope of advancement. A trusted valet, a promoted maid, rare but not unheard of. The rest simply exist. They wake, they work, they sleep. The days pass like water through open fingers. A boy finishes with the hearth and wipes soot from his hands. He is too young for bitterness, too old for wonder. He moves on to the next room. Marjorie folds the nightdress of her mistress with care, smoothing the creases. She checks the chamber pot, half full as expected, and makes a note to have it changed. She does not gag. That reaction passes within the first month. The steward walks the hall, noting creaking beams, counting bolts of cloth, and pausing to inspect a loose hinge with mild disapproval. He is, above all else, a man of hinges. The cook, having scolded 2 underlings and burned his thumb on the griddle, shouts for the flour sack to be brought in. It's lighter than it should be. He says nothing for now. But someone, somewhere, will be spoken to, And still, the noble family sleeps. Their dreams are undisturbed, their beds warmed, their floors swept, their slippers placed just so beside the fire. None of this happens by accident. It happens because, long before the first bell, someone rose in the dark, pulled on rough wool, lit a flame, took a breath, and began again. The first tasks of the morning are not glamorous. They are not ceremonial, nor honoured, nor even noticed by most of the household. But they are essential. A great medieval household, even one nestled in modest nobility, runs not on pageantry, but on repetition. Long before the nobles sit to breakfast, before prayers are mumbled in the chapel, before the cook decides someone has salted the stew too much, there are duties. Small, invisible but vital. Fires, floors and footsteps. That is where it begins. First, the fires. Not the grand hearths of the great hall. That will come. Not yet. These first flames are for warmth, not spectacle. They are coaxed into being in kitchens, servant halls, storerooms and private chambers, each one lit by a careful hand. Too little breath, and the flame sputters out. Too much, and the ashes flare up into your face like an angry cat. It's an art, really, a quiet one. You rarely hear of troubadours singing about the glories of the kitchen scullion who lit the main fire without losing an eyebrow. But perhaps they should. A boy, just past his 11th year, or perhaps not quite, kneels before the hearth in the outer kitchen. His knees press into the cold stone. He blows gently into the ash pile, eyes narrowed. His fingers are blackened already, though the day has barely begun. He tucks a twist of kindling beneath the grate, coaxing the ember to life. His breath fogs the air. The cold is biting. The kind of cold that finds its way through wool, past skin, into the marrow. But there's no time to dwell on it. Nearby, a girl of about 14 carries buckets of water from the courtyard well. The pail thuds heavily against her thigh. Her arms ache already, and it's only her third trip. She balances the weight carefully. Too much sloshing, and her gown will soak. Wet wool is a misery all its own. It clings, chills and chafes. But again, there's no time for such thoughts. The laundry maid is waiting for the water. A delay there delays the washing. A delay in the washing delays the dressing. And nobody delays the dressing of the lady of the house, not if they value their position. Let us turn now to the floors. The floor of a medieval manor hall is not, as one might picture in modern fancy, polished wood and velvet carpets. No, the floors are stone or packed earth, sometimes strewn with rushes. These rushes are not merely decorative. They serve to absorb spills, collect refuse, and muffle footsteps. But they must be replaced regularly, swept out, thrown to the pigs, or burned, and laid anew with fragrant herbs tucked inside. Not out of kindness, but to stave off the less desirable odours of indoor life. The cleaning of these floors falls to the lowest of the low. The scullery maids, the untested, the unlucky. Hands calloused, knees raw, they work in pairs or alone. One girl sweeps with a crude broom of bound twigs. Another collects waste in a wooden pan. Bits of bread, bones, ash, and the occasional mouse corpse, all swept together in a slow, circular rhythm. Not fast, never fast. One doesn't rush these things. To do so only stirs the dust. Above them the banners hang still. Tapestries depict hunting scenes, biblical miracles, and the Lord's lineage, all stitched with such care and pride. Beneath them, the servants work in silence. They do not look up. Footsteps. That's the third part of the morning ritual. Not the steps themselves, But where they go? Who takes them? Who hears them? Footsteps mean movement. They mean life. The manor wakes slowly, but it wakes deliberately. A maid walks briskly through the west corridor, with clean linens folded in her arms. She nods politely at the steward, though he does not return it. He's counting, always counting. Bedsheets, candles, bolts of cloth, servants, all must be accounted for. In the courtyard, the stable hands begin their rounds. The horses are restless this morning. One kicks the wooden wall of its stall. A grey mare stamps impatiently, nostrils flaring. The air smells of hay and manure and damp leather. The stable boy speaks to the beasts in a low voice, not because he expects an answer, but because quiet tones calm nervous animals. It's more courtesy than he gives most people. One servant, older than most, climbs a narrow flight of stairs to the Lord's solar. He carries a bucket of coals and a small iron tool. He will relight the brazier before the noble rises. It must be warm by the time a foot touches the floor. A chill floor is considered unseemly. He works quickly but carefully. Any soot spilled on the embroidered rug will be noticed. Not by the noble, of course, by the lady's maid. And she notices everything. Elsewhere, in the buttery, a man known only as the tapster checks the ale barrels. He thumps each one with the flat of his hand, listening for hollowness. He notes the levels with a stick marked with wax. The barrels are sealed with pitch and linen. Should any be found leaking, it is his neck that will bear the weight of suspicion. Literally, in some cases. Ale theft is no small matter, and servants have been known to help themselves after hours. Not out of defiance, but because sleep is easier when one is a little less awake. The air grows warmer now, faintly. The sun has not quite risen, but its promise can be felt in the dim golden glow slipping through the leaded windows. The day proper is about to begin. And still more tasks. The washroom is readied, towels are laid out. A shallow copper basin is filled with water, heated with a poker drawn from the fire. The noble family will wash their faces and hands before prayer, not their bodies. That's a rarer affair, and not a daily indulgence. But the face must be fresh, the hair combed. Even minor nobility must look the part. A young girl crouches near the privy chamber. She has drawn the short straw this morning. The night jars must be emptied. A chamber pot is a simple thing, usually ceramic, sometimes brass for the more refined. But it must be carried out discreetly and washed thoroughly. No one wants to be reminded of the bodily needs of a baroness. That sort of realism is best left to the lower floors. Near the larder, a boy turns the meat spit. Slowly, evenly. A leg of mutton hangs from the iron hook. It is not breakfast fare, but preparation must begin early. The cook has been muttering about visitors since last night, though no one has confirmed anything. Still, better to prepare than be caught unready. There are few sins greater than a cold roast in a noble house. The staff move without instruction. They know their roles. Training is done not in lessons, but by imitation, repetition, and the occasional cuff to the ear. A new servant watches the older ones closely. Not just what they do, but how they move, where they pause, when they speak, and, more often, when they do not. Hierarchy runs through this world like mortar in the walls. The steward stands above the chamberlain above the grooms above the scullery boys, and all beneath the noble family, of course, who themselves answer only to the monarch and God, in that order, depending on who's watching. Yet there are subtle ranks within the servant class as well. The lady's maid, for example, may be of lower birth than the cook, but her proximity to the family grants her certain privileges. Better meals, finer fabrics, a room with a door. The laundress might be plain-spoken, but she knows every secret hidden in the Lord's linens. A good servant never forgets their place, but the clever ones know how to manoeuvre within it. Now the chapel bell tolls. Its sound is deep, resonant, almost mournful. It echoes through the halls like a sigh. The household is summoned, not by name, but by tone. The nobles to prayer, the servants to motion. Feet shuffle, heads bow. Not out of devotion necessarily, but out of habit. And so the first phase of today draws to a close. The fires are lit, the floors are swept, the footsteps have done their work. Soon the noble family will rise, and the real performance will begin. But for now, beneath the grand stones and polished silver, the heartbeat of the manor continues in quiet rhythm. Fires, floors and footsteps, the tasks that no one sees, and the ones that make everything else possible. There is food in the manor, great heaps of it sometimes. Roasted meats, golden pies, fresh trout, sweetmeats, stewed fruits, cheeses wrapped in herbs, and crusty loaves pulled from the oven's mouth, still steaming. It glistens on polished platters. It's sliced and served with practised elegance on trestle tables beneath carved rafters and painted beams. Nobles eat with delicate fingers, or with knives that have never seen a turnip in their lives. But that's not the food we're concerned with here. We are descending down the steps, past the carved angels and oaken panels, down through a narrow passageway into the kitchens, and from there, a little further down, into the servants' hall. This is where the rest of the food ends up, or more accurately, what's left of it. The term leftovers doesn't quite do justice to the practice. In a well-ordered noble household, the allocation of food is a matter of strict hierarchy and recorded ration. Who gets what? How much? How often? These things are watched carefully. By the steward, the cook, and if you believe the whispers, by God himself. At the top of the servant ladder, of course, come those closest to the noble family. The steward, the lady's maid, the chaplain, perhaps even the tutor. These folk sometimes eat below stairs, but not always. On certain days, they are permitted to take meals in private chambers, with food brought in discreetly from the kitchen. A plate of cold roast, a wedge of cheese, a small jug of ale. Nothing ostentatious, but certainly better than what the rest receive. In the servants' hall itself, long, dark, low-ceilinged, and smelling faintly of damp wool and old onions, the meal is a different affair. It begins with bread. Always bread. Coarse, dark, and dense. Baked from barley, or rye, or sometimes maslin, a mix of wheat and rye grown together. It's not the fluffy white loaves served in the great hall above. Those are sieved, spiced, and shaped with buttered hands. No, this is black bread, solid, heavy, filling in the way that stones fill a sack. Pottage follows, a stew of sorts, though the term stew may be generous, depending on the day. It is a thick soup made from whatever is available: beans, peas, onions, leeks, cabbage, herbs, and if fortune smiles, bone broth. Sometimes a scrap of meat is boiled in for flavour. Occasionally the meat remains. More often it does not, but one does not complain. A servant's stomach is trained to hope cautiously. You eat what is given. You do not ask questions. If the pottage is thin today, it might be thicker tomorrow. If the bread is hard, you soften it in ale. If the ale is sour, well, it keeps the water from killing you, doesn't it? Speaking of ale, it is the one thing that flows fairly freely in most medieval kitchens. Not because the manor is generous, but because clean water is suspect. Ale is brewed in barrels and drunk in tin cups. It is weak, barely alcoholic, but nourishing. Children drink it. The elderly sip it. It is safer than the stream, and, if you're lucky, warmer than the well. The meal is eaten quickly. Not because it is especially good, but because there is always more to be done. Servants sit on long benches. The table is bare wood, darkened from years of elbows and spills. There are no napkins, no salt dishes, no silver forks. One eats with a spoon or with fingers. And if you've lost your spoon, well, you borrow one, or you go without. Conversation is allowed, but only in moderation. Laughter is rare. The tone is subdued, shaped more by weariness than solemnity. Some servants glance upward, not in prayer, but toward the floor above, where the noble family will soon sit to their first meal, surrounded by carved fruit bowls and linen cloths. The difference is not painful, it's simply understood. It's always been this way. In larger households, there is an official in charge of provisioning. The pantler oversees bread and food storage. The butler guards the wine and ale. The kitchener manages preparation. Each one watches the others with subtle suspicion. If the bread goes missing, it's the pantler's fault. If the ale is watered, the butler takes the blame. If a side of beef disappears, the cook is questioned. And beneath them, those who do the carrying, chopping, boiling and cleaning, well, they are questioned only when something goes wrong. Otherwise, they are silent. Now, not all food reaches the servants' hall directly. Some is scavenged. Not stolen, scavenged. There is a difference. When a platter is returned to the kitchen half-eaten, its contents are inspected. If a capon is barely touched, it may be repurposed into a pie for the next day. If it's too far gone, it might be passed to the staff. Often, it goes to the dogs first. But clever servants know where the morsels hide. In the carving scraps, in the ends of cheese left on the serving board, in the fruit bowl that sags a little under its own ripeness. A lad may pocket an apple. A girl may tuck a slice of bread into her apron. These things are not done openly, but they are done. It is not about greed, it is about sustenance. Servants work long hours, lifting, bending, scrubbing, hauling. Calories matter. A boy who skips breakfast is a boy who drops a platter. And a dropped platter is, quite literally, a career-ending mistake. On feast days, there is a different rhythm. The noble family dines lavishly. Dozens of dishes. Trenchers carved from stale bread. Roasted game birds. Spiced wine. Sugared dates. Jellies moulded into animal shapes. The servants, meanwhile, double their labour. The kitchen becomes a furnace of activity. Hands burn, feet blister. Tempers fray. And at the end, when the platters return and the hall is quiet, there is sometimes a reward. The steward may declare a feast for the staff. A secondary table laid out with what remains. Roast bones picked clean with care. Pies with the crusts gone but filling intact. Bits of honeyed fig. It's not much, but in a world of grey porridge and boiled beans, it tastes like sin. A boy once bit into a leftover sugared plum and wept. He had never tasted sweetness before, but this too is rare. Most days are the same. Black bread, pottage, ale, and perhaps, if the cook is in a fine mood, an egg. There is a rhythm to meals. Morning before the nobles wake, midday after they dine, evening long after the last silver goblet has been polished and put away. Servants eat quickly, and often on their feet. The kitchen does not stop. The fireplace must be watched. The pastry must be kept from burning. The stew must be stirred. Sometimes one eats while walking. A crust of bread held in a cloth. A spoonful of broth taken behind the door. A handful of peas eaten raw. The cook does not permit lounging. There are few things more offensive to him than a seated scullion with a full mouth. And yet, within this austere diet, there is variety. The changing seasons bring different herbs, different grains. Spring brings greens, nettles, leeks, garlic. Summer offers cherries, peas, beans. Autumn brings apples, onions, nuts. Winter brings, well, not much, unless the larder was well prepared. In some manors, the staff are given a ration book, not literal but remembered. 3 loaves per week. A pot of porridge per day. Ale twice daily. Meat on Sundays, if at all. Each item accounted for, mentally or in written roll, depending on the literacy of the steward. To take more than one's share is not only theft, it is disruption. Others go without, and the balance of the house depends on routine. It's worth noting that not all servants suffer equally. The steward eats better than the stable boy, the nursemaid better than the spit boy. Hierarchy applies even here, even at table. But among the lower ranks there is camaraderie. Bread is shared. Pottage bowls are passed down. A girl may whisper, "Eat mine," and push her plate across the table before hurrying back to the laundry. Small mercies are traded like coin. After the meal, the bowls are cleaned. Not by washing usually. Water is precious, and soap is expensive. Instead they are scraped, wiped, perhaps rinsed with ale. The spoons go back in the apron pocket. The scraps are thrown to the dogs, or to the pigs, or into the fire. The table is wiped, the bench is pushed in. And just like that, the meal is over. There is no lingering, no dessert, no conversation about philosophy, hunting, or politics. That belongs to the world upstairs. Below stairs, meals are moments of necessary silence. They fill the stomach just enough to keep the hands moving, the backs bending, the hours passing. They are not memories, they are fuel. Tomorrow there will be more bread, more pottage, more of the same, and so it continues. To serve a noblewoman is not like working in the kitchens, where the heat blisters your hands and the cook bellows like a wounded boar. Nor is it like cleaning the stables, where things are, at the very least, predictable in their unpleasantness. No, this sort of work, the work of the lady's maid, is of an altogether different nature. It is a quieter role, more delicate, but no less exacting. A noble household is a place of hierarchy, and within that world the lady's maid occupies a curious position. Not quite low, certainly not high, but uniquely close. She may eat coarse bread and wear rough wool, but she is privy to the inner chambers of power and emotion. She sees the Baroness without her veil, hears her speak without performance. She knows the smell of her perfume and what she smells like without it. And perhaps, more than any other servant, she must remember that her position can vanish overnight. Let us step into the solar. It's a small chamber, but richly appointed, hung with tapestries, padded with cushions, scented faintly with dried lavender and crushed mint. The shutters are drawn open just enough to let in the morning light, diffuse through oiled parchment. There's a carved chair by the fire, a box of embroidery silks beneath it, and a half-read psalter lying open on the bench. And at the far end of the room, the lady's maid, let us call her Joan, is folding a linen shift with great care. She's been up for some time now. The lady of the house does not rise early, certainly not with the bell. No, her mornings begin when the fire has been relit, the water warmed, and the basin placed just so on the carved wooden stand. Joan has already fetched the day's garments from the chest, chosen with care based on the weather, the day of the week, and whether any visitors are expected. Today it's a green wool gown with squirrel fur lining. Sturdy, respectable, but still soft at the throat. The fur is brushed, the hem shaken out, the lace is checked for snags. A girdle of copper links is coiled neatly beside it. The underkirtle is laid out first, then the shift beneath that. She's placed the slippers by the fire to warm, and now she waits. When the lady stirs, Joan moves quickly, but without haste. Haste is vulgar. She opens the shutters slightly, enough to let in the day, but not enough to offend sleepy eyes. She offers a gentle, "Good morrow, my lady," then turns to the pitcher. Water is poured carefully into the basin, steam rising in pale coils. The cloth is unfolded, wrung out, and placed over the lady's fingers. Nothing is rushed, nothing is forgotten. There is a rhythm to this, and Joan knows it well. Once the face is washed, the hair must be seen to. Joan removes the sleeping coif and begins combing. Carefully, slowly from the scalp down. A noblewoman's hair is her pride, and it must not be pulled or broken. Some ladies wear it braided, others in a net of gold cord, others under a wimple. Today it's to be twisted and pinned beneath a veil. Joan retrieves the pins, sharp little things with carved bone heads, and slips them one by one into her mouth as she works. She uses the same comb every day. Boxwood, oiled to a sheen, the teeth polished smooth by years of use. They talk sometimes, or rather the lady talks. Joan listens. She speaks of court fashions, of the way Lady Marjorie's gown dragged embarrassingly through the rushes at the feast, of how her husband snores, of how her sister sent a letter written in Latin, poorly, as usual. Joan makes small sounds of agreement and interest. She does not contradict. She does not ask questions. She certainly does not laugh unless she's supposed to. She's learned to read moods the way others read books. A glance, a pause, a sigh. These things mean far more than words. Now comes the dressing. It is a slow and careful process. The linen chemise is pulled over the lady's head and smoothed into place. Joan's fingers work quickly, tugging gently at the sleeves, fastening ties. Then the kirtle, a fitted garment that hugs the body and gives shape to the gown above it. This must be laced at the sides, and Joan does it with practised ease. One hand pulls, the other knots. The rhythm is soothing, so long as the laces do not snap. Over this goes the gown itself. Wool, green, lined with fur at the cuffs and hem. Heavier than it looks. Joan lifts it, holds it open, helps her mistress step in. She pulls it over the shoulders and begins fastening the sides. There's a particular loop that always catches. Joan has mended it twice already. Then the girdle, clasped low around the hips. Then the veil, which must be pinned just right, framing the face without drawing attention to the wrong parts of it. And finally, the slippers. Once the lady is dressed, Joan takes a step back. She surveys her work. If all is in place, She gives a small nod and says, "Shall I bring the mirror, my lady?" The mirror is not glass, of course. Glass is a luxury reserved for the king's chambers. This is polished steel, and it shows enough. The lady leans in, tilts her head, frowns slightly. Joan waits. She has waited in the same position 1,000 times. Eventually the lady says, "It will do." Joan curtsies and moves aside. The rest of the day is spent in constant motion, but motion without noise. Joan follows her mistress from chamber to hall, always 3 paces behind. She carries the sewing basket, the handkerchief, the cloak. She steps forward to receive letters, to pass along instructions, to offer a drop of rose water to a fainting guest. She waits in doorways, never speaking unless asked, and all the while she listens. There is gossip in this house. Of course there is. There's gossip in every house, but here it comes dressed in silks and sweet words. Joan hears it all. Whispered hints about the steward's accounts. Rumours of the Lord's dalliances. Complaints about the cook's pottage. Some of it is nonsense. Some of it decidedly not. But she repeats none of it. She has seen what happens to those who talk too freely. The last maid, Agnes, grew too friendly with the visiting page boy. One overheard word, and she was dismissed within the hour. No references, no wages, no second chances. Joan helped her pack. Neither of them spoke. In the afternoon, if the lady is working on her embroidery or reading her psalter, Joan prepares garments for the next day. She brushes the fur, checks the hems, airs out the bodices. She sharpens pins, polishes buckles, and sews repairs by the light of a narrow window. The thread is always waxed, the needle always fine. When the lady naps, Joan naps too, if only for a moment, seated against the doorframe, head bowed. Always alert, always ready. And when evening comes, she prepares the chamber. She lights the candles, draws the curtains, lays out the night rail. She warms a cloth to place around the lady's shoulders. She helps her undress, slowly, carefully, folding each garment as it comes off, laying it in a neat stack. The slippers go by the fire. The girdle is unfastened, the veil unpinned. Her lady's hair is brushed once more, 50 strokes at least, and plaited loosely for sleep. If the lady is tired, Joan says nothing. If she wants to talk, Joan listens. There are times when the lady weeps softly, turned toward the wall. When this happens, Joan holds out the linen cloth without a word. She does not offer comfort. That would be presumptuous. She offers presence. She sleeps on a straw pallet by the door. Her day ends when the lady's begins. There are nights she does not sleep at all. The lady calls out in her dreams, or demands water, or remembers something important and must send a message. Joan rises without complaint. That is the nature of her work. It is a position of closeness, yes, but closeness is not the same as equality. Still, there is something remarkable in the rhythm, the small acts of care, the unspoken knowledge passed from hand to hand, day after day. The lady never thanks her, not really, but Joan knows her service is seen. And so the days pass, in silence, in folds of fabric, in whispered instructions and perfectly tied knots. Grace, gossip, garments, the tools of the trade, and Joan, moving through it all like a shadow stitched to the edge of noble silk. The kitchen is not the heart of the manor, as some like to say. It is the furnace, the engine, the thing that smokes and sweats and stews long before anyone else is awake, and long after the last candle in the great hall is guttered out. It is not pretty. It is not genteel. and if you're a servant here, it is not quiet. Let us descend into it, stone walls blackened by soot, a central hearth large enough to roast a sheep whole, iron hooks hanging from beams overhead, heavy tables dusted with flour and crumbs and the faint smear of animal fat. It smells of ash and onions, sour ale, wet wood, damp wool, grease, and something burnt that no one has had the courage to identify. The kitchen in a noble household, say that of a wealthy baron or count, is its own little kingdom. And like all kingdoms, it has a ruler, the cook. A large man typically, not in the soft way of a merchant, but thick around the arms, heavy in the foot, with a voice like a dropped cauldron and a vocabulary to match. He has served in 4 households, survived 1 lord's mistress, 2 hunting accidents, and at least 1 food poisoning incident that he insists was not his fault. He does not tolerate waste, or tardiness, or incompetence, especially from the spit boys. Now the spit boy is perhaps the lowest of all kitchen ranks. He is usually between 10 and 13 years old, bony and perpetually scorched. His job is to turn the roasting spit, a long iron rod suspended over the hearth, on which haunches of meat rotate hour after hour. If he turns it too slowly, the meat burns on one side. Too fast, and it cooks unevenly. If he stops altogether, well, there are stories of what happened to the last boy who did that. He left with a welt on his back and a broken tooth. Possibly unrelated, possibly not. The kitchen is organised chaos. The kitchener, a senior assistant to the cook, oversees supplies, barley, beans, dried fish, salted pork, eggs, root vegetables, and the ever-dwindling store of preserved plums. He keeps a tally, not on paper, which is too precious, but in a ledger kept under lock and key, to be consulted only when suspicion arises. Beside him works the scullery maid, her arms red from the wash trough, apron soaked through. She scrubs pots black with soot, knives dulled from overuse, pewter dishes with their dented rims. Her hands are always busy. So is her mouth, usually muttering about someone else's mess. The undercooks tent the boiling pots. 1 for pottage, 1 for sauces, 1 for something that started out as fish, but may now be something else entirely. They stir with long wooden paddles, avoiding the occasional spark or splash. Burns are common. Blisters are ignored. A good kitchen maid learns to keep moving no matter what drips on her shoes. Meals in the manor come in waves, and the kitchen is never still. First comes breakfast, if you can call it that. For the nobility, it is light, perhaps a small bread roll, a slice of cold meat, a cup of warmed ale or watered wine. It is more about status than sustenance. They do not eat heavily in the morning. They leave that to the people who actually do the work. But even for this modest meal, the kitchen is aflame. Bread must be sliced, crusts trimmed, the right kind of cheese found. Butter must not be too hard. The ale must be tasted for freshness, by someone trusted, and preferably not too eager to drink. The servant's own meal, taken earlier and quickly, is nothing so refined. Coarse bread, porridge if there's time, a handful of dried peas if there's not. The real frenzy begins before dinner, which is served around mid-morning or shortly after. This is the largest meal of the day for the noble family. Several courses, a roast, a soup, boiled greens, perhaps a tart or custard. In winter, root vegetables and dried fruit. In summer, fresh herbs and soft cheeses. Each dish must be prepared with care, not because the lord is a connoisseur, but because he is easily offended. The cook bellows instructions. More salt! No, not that salt, the fine salt. You donkey! Who plucked this capon? It still has feathers on the leg. A kitchen boy scurries off with a limp bird. Another scrapes fat from a pan. A girl is sent to the herb garden for parsley. She comes back with mint. She's sent again. There is hierarchy here, even among the ingredients. Pork is common, mutton respectable, beef less so. It's expensive and hard to keep. Fowl is a treat, especially swan or goose. But the prized delicacy? Peacocks, served with their feathers reattached after roasting. Not for flavour, heaven forbid, but for display. The last one nearly caught fire when the feathers were set too close to the hearth. Sugar is rarer than meat. It is kept in a locked box, used only in pies for feast days, or when the lady of the house is feeling particularly melancholy. Spices are controlled like treasure: saffron, cinnamon, cloves, pepper. Pepper is weighed, literally weighed. If a servant uses too much without permission, they might find their wages docked, or worse, be accused of theft. A missing spoonful of cloves can be a criminal matter. As the meal is plated, it is not the cook who carries it forth, but the servers, footmen or pages in livery, each with clean hands and steady feet. Presentation is everything. A tray dropped in front of the Lord may as well be a death knell. Figuratively, of course, usually. Back in the kitchen, the cook finally sits. But not for long, because soon enough, it is time to prepare for supper. Smaller than dinner, served near dusk. Leftovers are sometimes used, though rarely for the Lord's table. A meat pie repurposed from morning's roast. A custard set again. But the servants, they eat whatever was scraped from the pan. Sometimes it's enough, sometimes not. The cook pretends not to see a girl sneaking crust from the pie edge, as long as no one else sees. The fire never quite goes out. Ashes banked at night, coals turned gently inward. It is tended in shifts. If the fire dies, it must be relit from scratch, and the cook will not forgive the one who let it happen. There are rules here, unspoken but known. Don't touch the meat before the cook carves it. Don't taste from the ladle. Don't use the good bowl for servant stew. Don't sit unless the cook sits first. Don't sing. Ever. The last boy who sang during pudding making was sent to the stables for a week. Came back quieter. Still hums, but only under his breath. Festivals are another matter. Then the kitchen becomes a war zone. Dozens of pies. Roast boar, complete with apple in mouth. Spiced wine, boiled in vats. Custards shaped into animals. Dishes cooked solely to impress. A fish pie with live birds inside, meant to fly out upon cutting. A marvel if it works, a mess if it doesn't. The servants barely eat on those days, too busy carrying, pouring, fetching, cleaning. But sometimes, if the mood is high, the cook throws them a bone, literally. A marrow bone passed to the scullery maid. A lick of honey scraped from a bowl. And when the guests are gone, and the candles extinguished, and the last goblet is polished dry, the kitchen rests. Briefly, the cook wipes his brow. The spit boy slumps against the wall. The scullery maid dunks her arms into the trough one last time. The work is hot. It is endless. It is badly paid. But it is safer than the fields, and warmer than the stables. And so they stay. Because tomorrow, before the sun rises, someone will need to boil water. The kitchen may roar, and the great hall may dazzle. But behind the scenes of a medieval manor, behind every plucked goose, counted coin, and carefully tapped barrel, stands a man with parchment in one hand and suspicion in the other. The steward. He does not boil. He does not sow. He does not serve. But nothing, truly nothing, happens without his consent. His realm is not the hearth or the field or the chapel, but the quiet ink-stained desk tucked away in the solar's outer chamber. Here, beneath shelves of scrolls and ledgers, in the company of tally sticks and weighted seals, the steward keeps the manor running. Let us begin with the books, not the romantic kind. These are dry things, leather-bound, rough-edged, with columns of names, numbers, debts, and deliveries. There is no poetry here, just dates, weights, and the quiet panic of arithmetic done by candlelight. Every sack of flour, every bolt of wool, every bushel of oats, all recorded. The steward knows how many hens should be laying, how much ale has gone missing, and precisely how many candles were used during the ladies' vigil last Tuesday. He keeps a wax tablet by his side for quick notes, scratched and scraped smooth again, over and over. His fingers are stained from ink. His back is stiff from sitting. He is not a man of drama. He is a man of detail. And he sees everything. Each morning, before the bell for matins, the steward walks the estate. Not for exercise, he would far prefer a chair, but for surveillance. His eyes scan the courtyard, noting a wobbly cartwheel, a broken fence post, a pig that looks suspiciously thin. He pauses by the stables. Too much straw used last week. He makes a note. He inspects the larder. Fewer hams than he expected. Another note. The staff know to keep busy when he's about. A servant leaning too long by the well is a servant inviting scrutiny. He walks with a pace just fast enough to make you uncomfortable. He speaks little, but when he does, it carries weight. Why was the linen order late? Why is the barley delivery light? Why are 3 candles missing from the scriptorium? He rarely raises his voice. He doesn't need to. He is the one who calculates wages, approves rations, and determines who receives new boots in the winter. He knows whose sister is ill, who owes a debt, who is related to the cook. Favour can be won, but only cautiously. The steward's room, what the staff call the counting room, is small, square, and far quieter than the rest of the manor. A single narrow window let in a beam of light, usually dust-streaked. The desk is broad and covered in parchment. Stacks of records rest nearby, weighted with stones. There's a cupboard of sealed boxes, each with its own key. He carries most of them on a chain beneath his tunic. This is where receipts are stored. Not like modern receipts, but letters from tenants, lists from suppliers, tallies from the reeve. Every penny that enters or leaves the estate is accounted for, at least in theory. If the steward is clever, and most are, he allows small losses here and there, just enough to keep things moving, but never so much as to suggest incompetence. He is not entirely alone in this work. The bailiff oversees the agricultural side of things, ploughs, harvests, livestock. The reeve, a peasant elected by fellow villagers, keeps order among the labourers. The steward listens to them, takes their reports and files them away. But he does not trust them. Trust is dangerous in his line of work. Once a week, sometimes more, the steward sits down with the lords of the manor. This is a delicate business. The lord does not care to hear about grain rot or the price of tallow. He wants to know that his coffers are full, his tenants are quiet, and his wine cellar suitably stocked. The steward provides just enough detail to reassure, but not enough to bore. My lord, the barley yield was 2 carts short, but the ale store remains sufficient. My lady's cloth order arrived from Coventry, though the purple dye is lighter than desired. The southern field's fence has collapsed. Repair is underway. He delivers news like a physician delivers a diagnosis. Calm, measured, precise, even if the patient is half dead. There is a cold power to this position. The steward does not order, not like a knight might. He does not threaten, but he can recommend. And a recommendation from the steward, say that a particular servant is unreliable, or that a cook's assistant has been careless with flour, can end a position overnight. That's why, when he enters the kitchen, the laughter stops. When he appears in the hall, servants straighten their backs. He is not cruel. He is not even particularly stern. But he is the one who writes it down. And in a world where most of what you do vanishes into thin air, the person who keeps the record matters more than you'd like. His tasks extend beyond food and wages. He manages rent collections from the manor's tenants, peasants who farm the lord's land in exchange for coin or labour. He records when they pay late, when they beg mercy, when they flee in the night. He walks the boundaries of the fields twice a year, muttering about hedgerows and trespasses, measuring with a knotted rope. He handles inventories of wine, of grain, of firewood. He checks the lock on the silver chest, inspects the linen stores, and audits the beehives. He does not tend them, he merely ensures they are tended. And then there is the hiring. New servants must pass through him. He reviews their origin, their references, and, if they are literate, their penmanship. He is wary of charm. A clever boy with too much polish may be a thief. A girl too shy to speak may hide a temper. He makes notes, keeps a list, updates it. Each holy day or feast, he must calculate costs. How many guests, how many courses, how many candles burned per hour. He checks the cook's request for raisins. Too many. He trims it down. He asks why there are no pigeons on the menu. The falconer blames the weather. The steward marks it down. He is never idle. Even when seated, his mind ticks. What is missing? What is overspent? What hasn't been counted? And yet, he is not heartless. Now and then, he looks the other way when a maid takes a crust of pie. He ignores a stable boy's second mug of ale on a hot day. These are calculated mercies, too strict, and the household rebels, too lenient, and the roof caves in. At year's end, the steward compiles the great roll, a parchment of terrifying size, listing income, outlay, wages, losses, and debts. It is presented to the Lord with a wax seal, often read aloud, a ritual of permanence. What was, and what was spent. This is when the steward shines. For though his life is lived in shadow, in numbers and whispers, he is the memory of the manor, the thing that prevents collapse, the one who knows what the lady's necklace cost, how many arrows the armoury holds, and when the gardener last trimmed the privy hedge. He does not fight in battle. He does not entertain in the hall. But he knows how much lamp oil was used last winter, and that sort of knowledge can be a weapon all its own. At night he sits alone. He drinks a modest cup of wine, writes one more line in the ledger, scratches a note to remind himself to count the geese in the morning. Then he folds his hands and thinks, because tomorrow the hay must be tallied, the tallow weighed, and someone must answer for the missing spool of linen thread. And he already knows who it was. The manor is humming, not with music, though that will come, not yet with laughter or the tinkling of goblets. No, this sound is older, more urgent. It's the hum of work. Broom bristles across flagstones, pails clanking in stone corridors, knives being sharpened against whetstones, voices calling out orders sharp as bells. A festival day approaches. And if you're a servant in a wealthy medieval household, this is not cause for celebration. It's cause for alarm. Because feasts, in all their glitter and glory, do not prepare themselves. They are built from bone and broth and blisters, from sweat and scalds and sleeplessness. They are forged in the hands of the kitchen staff, the scullery maids, the steward, the pages, the stable hands, the poor trembling boy tasked with polishing every pewter dish before dusk. And for all this labour, not a single bite of goose will pass your lips, not unless you steal it. And even then, best be quick about it. Let's begin, as always, at dawn. The steward has already been up 2 hours, tallying the stock. The cook is pacing in his slippers, threatening violence to anyone who misplaces a sprig of rosemary. The kitchen smells of smoke, herbs, onions, and the faint panic of undercooked pastry. Today, the noble family hosts a feast in honour of St. Martin's Day, or the Lord's birthday, or the arrival of a cousin from London. It doesn't matter. The reasons change. The effort does not. The menu is ambitious. Of course it is. There will be 4 courses, each with multiple dishes. Roasted meats, spiced stews, fresh bread, savoury pies, sugared fruit, perhaps even peacock. Skinned, roasted, then redressed in its own feathers for show. A culinary resurrection with a beak like polished gold, and an expression of eternal judgment. In the kitchen, the spitboys have been turning the joint since first light. One rotates a leg of mutton. Another manages a game hen that keeps slipping on the rod. The fire is fierce. The smoke burns. The back of the room is already covered in ash, and the scullery maid is coughing her way through the dishes. She scrubbed the same pan 3 times. Not because it's dirty, just because there's nowhere else to go. By mid-morning, the floor is a battlefield of flour and footprints. The cook is shouting about a missing tart. Someone's boiled the custard too long. The kitchener is down in the root cellar, arguing with a rat. The rat is winning. In the great hall, things are only slightly more serene. The pages have begun arranging the long trestle tables. They scrub each plank with vinegar and lemon peel to hide the scent of yesterday's turnips. Linen cloths, carefully pressed, are unrolled. Pewter goblets are lined in pairs, all facing the same direction. Cutlery is scarce in this age, so most guests bring their own knives. But the Lord's table, naturally, is set in full. Herbs are scattered across the floor. Lavender, thyme, rosemary. Partly to mask unpleasant smells, partly to show off. Only wealthy houses can afford wasteful fragrance. In the corner, the minstrels tune their instruments. Not loudly, mind, not yet. A wrong note at this stage could provoke a nervous steward into subtracting their bread allowance. Meanwhile, the lady's maid is ironing her mistress's best veil over a box of warm stones. The gown is blue wool, trimmed in fur, worn only on feast days. The lady has been in a mood all morning. A jewel is missing from her girdle, and she suspects, wrongly as it happens, that the laundry girl is to blame. The laundry girl, for her part, hasn't been near the solar in weeks. She's elbow deep in soap suds, wringing out a tapestry someone spilled candle wax on during last week's vigil. Upstairs, the noble family prepares at their own pace. Downstairs, the servants are moving like they've been lit on fire. Now comes the preparation of the showpieces. One is a pastry shaped like a castle, filled with spiced minced meat and dyed with saffron. Another is a roasted swan with gold leaf on its wings. The final touch will be a subtlety, a sugar sculpture shaped like a hunting scene. The sugar was imported at great cost. The sculptor, a young man with nimble fingers and a look of eternal anxiety, is sweating profusely. "Don't breathe too hard near the stag," he mutters to no one. He tips over. In the stable yard, the grooms are brushing down the horses, just in case a guest asks for a tour of the grounds. The stable boy is sent to fetch a hound for display near the high table. The hound smells, but he's decorative. In the kitchen, the steward appears. All conversation stops. He says nothing at first. He walks slowly, arms behind his back, observing. A scullery maid drops a spoon. A boy pretends he didn't just sneak a plum. The steward inspects the bread loaves, counts the pies, taps the ale barrel, makes a note on his wax tablet. He nods once and leaves. The kitchen exhales a little. Midday arrives. The guests are beginning to arrive. Lesser nobles, neighbours, men of the cloth. They dismount in the courtyard, greeted by the porter and shown through to the hall. Cloaks are taken, boots are wiped, gloves are warmed by the fire. The first course is served. Servants line up, each with a dish, moving in rhythm through the great doors. Pages dart forward to open them. The cook watches from the kitchen, tense as a drawn bow. The food must be hot, it must be upright. It must be, above all, impressive. Roast pork with apples, fish in aspic, boiled capon with parsley. A man stumbles, but the platter stays level. The hall bursts into praise. The cook sighs in relief. The servants retreat, wait in the wings, and prepare the next wave. Meanwhile, their own stomachs growl. There will be no dinner for them until the third course is served. And even then, it will not be in the hall. It will be hunched in the corner of the utery, licking grease off crusts and gulping the dregs of ale. Someone once tried to sneak a roasted quail from the Lord's platter and was caught with it halfway down their sleeve. They were dismissed before dessert. The steward never even raised his voice. The second course is served. A sweet and sour rabbit, followed by onion tarts, followed by boiled carrots and leeks, followed by a custard that looks fine, but has curdled slightly. No one mentions it. The noble guests drink deeply from their goblets and laugh too loudly. The minstrels begin to play, a slow melody on pipes and lute, light enough to keep conversation flowing, heavy enough to drown the occasional belch. The third course brings the subtleties, a sugar castle, a pastry lion, and the infamous stag. It has survived, antlers intact. The sculptor, standing in the shadows, nearly weeps with joy. At last the fourth course. Nuts, dried fruits, candied ginger, wafers, cheese. The guests nibble. The cook collapses onto a bench. The servants eat what they can, where they can. Bread crusts, chicken scraps. A handful of raisins if no one's watching. No one thanks them. No one mentions them. They are not supposed to be seen. When the feast ends, the real work begins. Platters are cleared. Bones collected. Ale barrels drained. The tables are wiped. Linens gathered for boiling. The rushes are swept up and thrown into the fire. The cook issues final orders, already thinking about tomorrow's bread. The lady removes her veil and hands it to her maid without a word. Her shoes are kicked off. Her girdle unfastened. She complains about the music. The servants do not comment. Hours pass. Candles are snuffed out, trays are stacked, dishes are rinsed, ashes are swept. By midnight, the manor sleeps, and in the kitchen, one boy eats the last corner of a meat pie, cold from the shelf, and calls it the best thing he's tasted in months. The noble household is never truly quiet. Even in the middle of the night, after the candles are snuffed and the hearths banked to coals, there are still footsteps, soft, measured, unshod. A door creaks open. A figure slips through. Somewhere someone speaks too softly to be overheard, or too loudly for their own good. This is not the noise of revelry or labour. It is the sound of secrets. And if the manor has secrets, then its servants are the keepers. Not because they wish to be, and certainly not because anyone has trusted them with confidences. Quite the opposite. The work of a servant places them, quietly, constantly, in corners, alcoves, behind drapes, beyond doors left slightly ajar. They are there when people forget they are there. They listen because they cannot help but hear. They remember because they cannot afford to forget. Take, for example, the chamberlain, the personal attendant to the Lord. He is responsible for the Lord's wardrobe, his private rooms, his schedule, and occasionally his excuses. He handles letters, lays out tunics, and stands silently during conversations not meant for his ears. But he hears them nonetheless. Affairs of land, alliances, debts, whispered names said with too much meaning. The Lord rarely glances at him, sometimes calls him by the wrong name, never asks if he's married, doesn't know or doesn't care that he isn't. Yet the chamberlain knows what the Lord fears, what he covets, whom he envies. He has seen the letters he pretends not to have received. He knows that the Baron drinks before matins on feast days, that he has a sword hidden behind the wall panelling, that he once told his confessor he hated his eldest son. He says nothing. He writes nothing. He simply waits. There is also the lady's maid, who, by now, has heard far more than her mistress would be comfortable admitting. The snide comments about visiting nobles, the sobbing fits after letters arrive, the rage when a favoured gown is spotted on another woman at court, the obsession with a silver comb gifted long ago and never worn. The maid knows how often the lady takes her tincture. She knows about the midnight visits from the chaplain. She knows which drawer the lady hides her jewellery in when her husband is angry. And she has seen, once or twice, bruises where there should be none, but she says nothing. She is not a fool. Even the stable boy, lowest on the manor's ladder, has seen things he shouldn't. He saw the knight's page hand a pouch to the steward's assistant, something clinking faintly inside. He saw the Baron's youngest daughter ride out alone, without an escort, and return flushed and breathless an hour later. He once found a letter, unopened, tucked into a saddle blanket. He cannot read, of course, but he recognized the seal. It belonged to the same cousin who was later disinherited. He buried the letter in the dung heap. No one ever asked about it, but they watched him more closely afterward. Then there is the household priest, or chaplain, technically not a servant, but close enough. He hears confessions. He gives sermons. He blesses the bread and wine, and makes polite conversation at supper. He also knows who tithes more than they can afford, who cheats, who steals, and who sleeps in the wrong bed. He writes none of this in the parish roll, but he knows which servants are honest, which are clever, and which have seen too much. Not all secrets are whispered. Some are stored in ledgers, kept locked in the steward's chamber. Ledgers that show odd purchases. A second bolt of velvet not delivered to the lady's wardrobe. An overpayment to the mason for repairs that never happened. The steward notes it all. He doesn't correct the numbers. He simply adds them to a mental column labelled "Useful Later." In a household of rank and ritual, information is currency. Not coin, servants rarely have much of that. But the knowledge of who borrowed whose horse without leave, or who has been sneaking down to the kitchens at night, or which noble has a taste for something the church disapproves of, that is valuable. Most of the time, that knowledge remains tucked away, like an unused candle. But now and then, someone lights the wick. A footman might mention, casually of course, that the steward's son has been staying in the guest wing. Odd, for someone not listed in the rolls. A chambermaid might recall that a certain guest always asks for fresh rushes, twice a day. Curious, really. The floor is dry. This kind of gossip is traded quietly. Often not for gain, but for survival. A cook's assistant who knows the laundry maid is with child, though unmarried, may hold his tongue until he needs someone to cover his shift. Then it becomes a bargain. Just this once, he'll say. And it is. Until the next time. Secrets are not always about scandal. Some are small, strange, mundane. A page who pretends to be noble-born, but was really a cooper's son. A maid who can read, and does, quietly, late at night, by the kitchen fire. A scullery boy who hoards candle stubs to melt into a lump and sell in the village. No one asks, no one tells, but everyone sees. In the evenings, after the nobles have gone to their beds and the fire has burned low, the servants sometimes gather, not formally, but in corners and corridors. Someone sharpens a knife. Someone darns a stocking. Someone mutters about the steward's new boots. These are not relaxed moments. They are simply pauses, the kind you find between storms. And if someone starts to say something, a little too boldly, the others glance toward the shadows. The manor walls are thick, but not deaf. One servant, years ago, tried to sell what he knew. He took a letter, private, sealed, and passed it to a travelling friar. The friar reported it. The servant was dismissed before the hour was out. No one saw him leave. The story is told often. Not for warning, just as a reminder. Even death does not silence everything. There was a nursemaid, long gone now, who cared for the Baron's children. She saw them born, saw them grow, saw what they became. She lived in a small room above the kitchen, with herbs hanging from the beams and a cat no one liked. She died in her sleep one winter, holding a wooden toy she'd carved. After her death, someone found a bundle beneath her bed. Letters, bits of cloth, a broken ring. No one knows what became of them. But the Lord's second son was sent abroad that spring, and he never came back. The servants know, even if they say nothing. They know which door creaks open just before dawn. They know which child belongs to which father. They know who favours the wine too much, who fears the priest, who locks their door with trembling hands. But the key to survival in a noble household is not what you know. It's knowing what to forget. The servants who last, the ones who grow old in their aprons and livery, are not the boldest or the brightest. They are the quiet ones, the patient ones, the ones who understand that to speak truth is to invite ruin, that the safest place for knowledge is behind your teeth. There is power in silence, a hard, heavy sort of power. And so they go about their tasks, pouring wine, folding linen, lighting lamps, with eyes lowered and ears wide open. The Baron laughs in the great hall, unaware that the steward has read his last 3 letters. The lady frets over her gown, unaware that her maid found the poem in the hem. The chaplain preaches about virtue, unaware that the stable boy saw him leave the lady's chamber, barefoot and flushed. The manor holds many secrets, but the servants carry them, and they never ever drop them. A medieval household, even a well-run one, is not a place where things go perfectly. It is not a machine. It is a living thing, full of wooden beams and weathered stone and human beings who forget, who falter, who slip. And when they do, when something breaks, burns or disappears, someone is always to blame. Sometimes it's no one's fault. Sometimes it's the wind, the rain, a rat in the flour sack, or just bad luck. But noble households do not run on generosity. They run on order. And when that order is disturbed, it must be punished. Let us begin with something small. Say a servant knocks over a goblet during supper. The lord is in mid-sentence, gesturing grandly, and a young footman, nervous and new, sets down the tray too quickly. The goblet tips. Red wine spills across the white linen. The lady gasps, the steward frowns, the footman stands frozen holding his breath. The punishment may be minor. A docked wage, a sharp word, a day spent cleaning the privy steps with a rag and vinegar. But it is not forgotten. Mistakes are remembered in this house, especially by those who tally wages and keep track of linen stains. Now, say a servant drops something more important. A silver spoon, for instance. Not into mud, but into the fire. It melts before it can be retrieved. The spoon was engraved. A wedding gift from the Baron's uncle. No one uses it, but it is meant to be there. And now it isn't. This is no longer a mistake. This is carelessness. And carelessness suggests a lack of respect. The servant may be summoned to the steward's chamber. He will be made to explain. He will not shout. No one shouts in front of the steward. He may say he was tired, that he meant no harm, that he tried to retrieve it. The steward will nod, write something down, and close the ledger. The servant will be sent to the outer fields for a week, or perhaps removed from household duty altogether. There are always ditch-digging crews in need of extra hands. The work is heavier, the food is worse, and there is no fire to warm your hands at the end of the day. Worse still, the punishment might come in silence. No word spoken, no sentence declared, but suddenly no one meets your eyes. You're given fewer tasks, less important ones. You're not trusted with the fine napkins or the ale keys. The steward never calls your name again, and in a week or two a new boy arrives. He is placed in your spot at the table. He wears your apron. Your mattress is moved to the coldest corner. One morning you are told that your services are no longer required. You're given a half loaf of bread and shown the door. That is how it ends for many. There are greater offences, of course. Theft, for one. Even something small. An extra strip of bacon, a candle stub, a trinket from the lady's chest. If discovered, it changes everything. Punishment varies. If the lord is in a generous mood, the thief might be publicly dismissed, with a handful of coppers and a warning never to return. If the household is strict, or if the item stolen is of value, the servant might be beaten. Not in rage, not even out of cruelty, just because it is expected. One does not allow theft to go unpunished. That would be chaos. The beating is done in the courtyard, usually. A short speech is made about honour, or trust, or loyalty. Then the servant is whipped with a leather strap or birch rod. A few lashes. Enough to mark. Enough to remind. The younger servants are made to watch. There is no cheering. This is not a sport. But the message is clear. Sometimes the law is invoked. Rarely, but it happens. A servant who steals a silver goblet might be turned over to the reeve, or even brought before the manorial court. There, the punishment is no longer private. It is public. Stocks, perhaps. Or branding. Or imprisonment in the local jail, if there is one. That servant does not return. The manor keeps his wages. But not all disasters are the result of sin. Some are simple accidents. A scullion girl slips on a wet floor and breaks her wrist. She can no longer scrub pots. The cook, short-staffed, assigns her to peeling onions. She peels poorly. She is replaced within the month. An undercook mishandles a knife and gashes his thigh. He tries to keep working, bandaged and limping. The wound festers. He is sent to the almoner for treatment, but he never quite recovers his place. Another is brought in to take his spot. The kitchen keeps moving. The knives keep chopping. A stable boy falls from the loft. No one knows how. He wakes confused, limping. The Baron's son claims he saw him drunk on cider. The boy is beaten for negligence. He insists he never drank. It doesn't matter. The Baron's son is believed. The boy is dismissed. There are also misunderstandings. A footman caught speaking too freely in the hall. He was only repeating what he heard the steward say about the wine barrels. But it's taken as insult. The steward says nothing. But a week later, the footman is assigned to mucking out the latrines. He never speaks freely again, or a maid is seen leaving the chaplain's quarters. She says she was delivering laundry. Others suggest otherwise. Nothing is proven, but she is moved to the outer buildings. Her new quarters are colder. Her tasks are heavier. The message is clear. In a noble household, reputation is everything, and servants have very little to protect them when it falters. Even illness is viewed with suspicion. A boy with fever is told to keep away from the bread. He does, but someone else catches the sickness. Bread is blamed. The boy is sent away. He may recover. He may not. But he will not return. Death, too, visits the manor. It does not knock. A cook once collapsed into the fire. Heart stopped mid-stir. He was pulled from the flames half-burned. The steward arranged for a burial. The kitchen was cleaned. A new cook arrived 3 days later. Life continues. The servants know that their place is never guaranteed, that a single misstep, a single bad day can turn into disgrace, that their names are written in chalk, not ink. And so, they are careful. They speak softly. They carry trays with both hands. They polish every spoon twice. They nod when spoken to. They keep their heads down. But sometimes, even caution is not enough. A girl is accused of stealing lace. She didn't. The steward's niece planted it. The girl pleads, cries. The lady listens but shrugs. The girl is dismissed. No one stops her. The steward's niece smirks. The cook sees it. He never says a word. But 2 weeks later she finds her shoes missing, her tasks doubled, her name mysteriously omitted from the ledger. She complains. The steward says nothing, but the cook smirks. Justice, when it happens, is quiet. Just as disgrace is quiet. It arrives like fog. One morning you are one of them. The next you are not. And no one ever explains why. The end of the day in a noble medieval household does not arrive like a closing curtain. It does not sweep in all at once with thunder or fanfare. It arrives instead the way dusk seeps into a room through a crack in the shutters. Quietly, gradually, and entirely expected. The great manor slows, not stops. It exhales. And the servants, after hours of bending, polishing, scraping and serving, begin the final rituals of the day. Not relaxation, there is no such thing in service, but closure. The long night is a different kind of work. Dinner has passed. The great hall, once alive with the scrape of knives and clatter of trenchers, is cooling to stillness. The guests have returned to their chambers. The nobles sit in the solar, drowsy with meat and wine, their words drifting like smoke. In the kitchens, the final pots are being scrubbed. Not with soap, too precious, but with sand and ash, scoured clean by blistered hands and old cloths. The scullery maid, her arms sore to the shoulder, mutters under her breath as she scrapes crusted fat from the bottom of a spit pan. She's been on her feet since sunrise. Her knees feel as though they belong to a much older woman. Across the stone floor, the cook is giving his final orders for the next day, without turning from his seat, eyes half closed, tankard in hand. He names things like a priest reciting liturgy. Oats, lard, marrow bones, garlic, barley, goose. Each word is a command. Each one carries consequences if forgotten. One of the undercooks scratches the list into a wax tablet, trying not to drop it into the fire. He will rewrite it in the morning when his hands are steadier. The fire is banked, not extinguished. Never that. It must smoulder through the night so that the cook does not start from cold come morning. A fire that has gone out is not simply an inconvenience. It is a confession of laziness, a black mark. The hearth breathes quietly now, reduced to glowing embers and the occasional pop of pitch from an old log. Elsewhere in the manor, in its many rooms and recesses, the servants begin the closing gestures of the day. The chambermaid lays out clean linen at the foot of the Lord's bed, smoothing it with practised hands. She places a sprig of mint on the pillow, not for beauty, but to mask the sour air. The nobleman rarely bathes. Few do, but the bed must smell fresh. The Lord's Chamberlain checks the latch on the wooden chest beside the bed. It contains the man's belt, rings, a worn prayer book, and a dagger he keeps for peace of mind. The Chamberlain does not touch the dagger. He simply ensures it's where it should be. Down the hall, the lady's maid is folding her mistress's gowns into the carved oak coffer that holds her finer things. Each fold is precise. The veil is laid on top. Hairpins are counted and returned to their small pouch. A misplaced pin may be dismissed as clumsiness once, twice, and it's laziness. 3 times, it's theft. The lady is brushing her hair in slow strokes, half lost in thought. She does not speak. The maid does not prompt her. In time, the lady will hold out the brush without a word. The maid will take it, tie back her mistress's hair, unlace her gown, and help her into her linen night shift. Then she will place a warmed stone wrapped in cloth beneath the blankets, so that the lady's feet will not find chill when she slips into bed. It is an intimate ritual, repeated nightly, made sacred by repetition. And when it is done, the maid retreats to the mat she keeps by the door. She will sleep there, lightly, listening. The servants' quarters are not quiet yet, not entirely. Most lie above the stables, or beneath the manor itself, in stone-walled rooms with one window too small to crawl through. The air is cold. It smells of wool, dust, and sometimes regret. A dozen servants may sleep in a single room, men and women in separate chambers. Privacy is a luxury. Silence is a choice. Some pull off their boots and collapse. Others whisper across the dark, voices low and dry with fatigue. Not gossip. There's no energy for that now. Just the final scraps of thought before sleep pulls them under. A girl counts out her remaining threads, trying to mend her only tunic before the fabric gives way entirely. A boy tries to remove a splinter from his palm with a bent needle and a curse. Another writes a letter by candlelight, though he cannot read it aloud without stammering. The oldest servant in the room, a laundress with crooked fingers and one eye turned slightly askew, pulls the blanket over her shoulder and hums a tune that no one knows. It is not for them. It is for the rhythm of the place, the hum of labour wrapped in melody. In the upper levels, some servants remain awake by duty. The night watchman makes his rounds with a small lantern and a cudgel. He walks the perimeter, taps the doorposts, checks the gates. Occasionally, he nods to a stable hand tending a restless horse. There is not much to guard against. Most threats come from inside, not without, but it is custom. And custom, like everything in the manor, must be followed. The chaplain sits in his chamber, reading by firelight. He is copying a psalm onto a scrap of vellum. His Latin is rough, his ink running low. He may not finish it, he doesn't mind. The steward too stays up longer than most. He adds the day's tallies to his ledger. 2 bolts of linen issued to the laundry. 1 bottle of oil spoiled in transit. 3 candles burned to the wick in the great hall. He notes the maid who spilled broth. He marks the kitchen boy who worked beyond his hours. These details matter. They form the skeleton of the house. He puts down the pen, rubs his brow, sips from the same cup of ale he began 3 hours ago. Then he locks the ledger. He places the key beneath his pillow. He, too, sleeps. By now the manor is still. The only sounds, the slow hiss of embers in the kitchen, the creak of beams adjusting to the cold, the quiet breath of people too tired to speak. And beneath it all, a current of obedience. There is no rebellion here, no revolt, no grand drama. The discipline of the house is not enforced with whips or chains, but with rhythm, with custom, with duty. A servant wakes, works, eats, and sleeps, not because anyone shouts at them, but because they know no other way. The day ends because it must. The night begins because it always has. A life shaped not by choice, but by pattern. Yet even in the dark, there is memory. A kitchen maid stares at the ceiling, remembering the time she saw her brother pass through the village years ago. He had gone to fight for the Earl. He wore boots twice as fine as hers. He didn't recognize her. A stable boy dreams of horses. He dreams they speak to him. A page dreams of being a knight, but wakes cold, with straw in his hair. And some do not dream at all. They lie still, folded in on themselves like cloth placed back into a chest, waiting for the bell, for the footsteps above, for the scraping of iron on the kitchen grate, the return of light, and with it another day of folding, scrubbing, bowing, fetching, and remembering their place. The night does not ask for anything grand, just that they be ready again, to light the fires before the gentry wake, to empty the chamber pots before the first knock at the door, to place the pitcher and bowl just so beside the bed, to polish the spoon, lace the boot, press the seam, to do everything the same as yesterday, and do it better. This is how the manor survives, not through lords and ladies, but through those who labour in silence, beneath the floorboards and behind the tapestries, those who end each day not with applause, but with aching hands and folded blankets, and rise again tomorrow as if nothing ever hurt at all. Good morning. You're awake. Not because you've had enough sleep. Don't be ridiculous. But because the stone floor you were using as a mattress has successfully leached the last bit of warmth from your body. Also, the cook stepped on you. Twice. That's just how your day begins when you're the lowest ranking life form in a medieval castle. Welcome to the thrilling career of a scullery maid. You are unpaid, unwashed, and largely unnoticed unless someone needs something cleaned or someone else to blame. You sleep beside the hearth because it's the only warm place in the kitchen, and by warm we mean marginally less cold than outside. Your bedding is a burlap sack filled with straw that has seen better decades. It smells like burnt fat, wet wood, and crushed ambition. Your shift, that's your one piece of clothing, is made of coarse, undyed wool that doubles as both pyjamas and uniform. It's been boiled maybe twice this year. Probably once. Possibly never. You rise before the sun. Before the roosters. Before God, it seems. Why? Because everything that needs to happen before the nobles wake, fire, water, bread, cleaning, is your responsibility. Technically not yours alone, but let's be honest, the other girls know how to hide when work is handed out. You haven't learned that trick yet. Or maybe you just weren't born slippery enough. The hearth is dead. The embers have gone cold overnight. That's bad. A scullery without fire is like a knight without armour. Still dangerous, but mostly just pathetic. You shuffle outside into the pitch-black courtyard, barefoot, because your shoes disintegrated last spring, and were repurposed as door insulation. The flagstones are wet and jagged. You gather kindling with hands too numb to feel splinters. Back inside, you crouch by the hearth and begin coaxing flame from damp wood and angry thoughts. Eventually the fire crackles to life, and you hold your fingers above it until they stop resembling corpse fingers. You're now ready for your next task, water. The castle does not have plumbing. It has you. You haul wooden buckets from the well. Gallons and gallons of water, heavy and sloshing, balanced on a yoke across your narrow shoulders. It takes multiple trips. Your arms burn. Your back screams. Your knees wobble like boiled barley. And you haven't even reached breakfast yet. By the time the kitchen staff starts filtering in, yawning, stretching, scratching, you're on your fourth trip to the well. No one thanks you. No one even makes eye contact. You are furniture with legs, that's all. The cook bursts in like a thunderclap, in a bad mood. She's sweating already, barking orders, and armed with a wooden spoon that's been repurposed as a disciplinary device. She shouts something about the stew pot still being crusty. That's your cue to start scrubbing. Again. You scrub pots until your knuckles bleed. No soap, of course. That's for rich people and sinners. You use ashes, sand, and lye. If someone remembers to make it, the lye burns. So does the ash, in its own gritty way. You've developed something between a callus and a chemical burn on your right hand. The left one's worse. The scullery is a room of punishment disguised as a workspace. There's no ventilation. The one window is permanently clogged with soot. Everything smells like meat that's been boiled too long, and something else you don't want to identify. You spend most of your day hunched over basins, scraping grease from pewter trenchers, and slapping rats off the table with a ladle. Let's talk about rats. They run this place. You just work here. Mid-morning arrives. You haven't eaten. There's a heel of bread in your apron, hidden and dry as chalk. You gnaw on it behind the doorway, trying not to look guilty. You fail. A kitchen maid spots you, reports you, and now you're assigned to latrine pot duty for the rest of the week. Congratulations. Later, you get promoted to onion duty, which is just a fancy way of saying cry professionally for 2 hours. You chop onions until your face is a waterfall. No one asks if you're okay. Everyone assumes you're just weeping from your station in life. Around noon, the nobles take their first meal of the day. You carry in dishes, step precisely where you've been told, and do not make eye contact under any circumstances. Nobles don't like to be reminded that servants have eyes, or faces, or thoughts. You hold a pitcher for a full hour and are never asked to pour. Your arms go numb, that's normal. After the meal, you clean again. The same trenchers, now slick with gravy. Bones tossed carelessly under the table. Half-eaten pies, chewed grapes, and something that may have once been a fish. You scrape it all into the slop bucket. You are not allowed to keep scraps, but you might sneak one. Just once. Just the crust. Just the edge. Just enough to keep standing. Afternoon blurs into evening. You haul more water. You peel more roots. You mop the floor. You sweep the hall. You get blamed for the dog vomiting in the solar, even though you've never even seen the solar. Doesn't matter. You were there. Spiritually. As the sun sets, dinner prep begins. It's louder now. Hotter. The hearth is blazing, smoke filling the rafters. Someone drops a pot. The cook screams. A fire nearly starts. You slap it out with your apron and keep moving. You're allowed to eat again, this time from a shared bowl passed between 5 girls. The stew is mostly liquid. A floating root, a grain of barley, and a suspicious chunk that might be squirrel. Doesn't matter. You eat it. It's food. Finally, dinner is served to the nobles. You stand nearby again, a background character in someone else's pageant. Your feet are soaked. Your back is locked. You haven't spoken in hours except to say, "Yes, cook." "Sorry, cook." Or, "It won't happen again, cook," whether or not you know what happened. Night falls. Dishes again. More scrubbing. Bones stuck to the pan like medieval cement. Your hands are shaking now. Not from cold. From exhaustion. You're dismissed with a grunt. You crawl back to your sack near the hearth. The fire has dimmed to glowing embers. You press close to the stone for warmth. Your tunic is still damp. You smell like smoke, onions, and fatigue. Someone's already asleep beside you. Someone else is crying quietly. You don't ask who. You don't want to know. You lie there for a moment, not asleep, not quite awake, thinking about what came before this. You didn't choose this life. No one chooses to be a scullery maid. You were born into it. Your mother worked in the dairy until her back gave out. Your aunt did laundry until she caught fever from the river. Now it's your turn. You're part of the great medieval inheritance, suffering passed down like a ladle. There's no path up. You don't become a cook. You don't marry the steward. You don't get promoted to lady's maid and learn embroidery under soft candlelight. That's fiction. You grow older. Your hands get worse. Eventually, you're too slow to scrub the pots, and they replace you with someone younger, cheaper, and less likely to fall asleep standing up. So, you pay attention to the little things, the rhythm of the kitchen, the shifting alliances between servants, the unspoken rules of survival. Never correct the cook. Always share the driest part of the bread with the girl who's bleeding. Stay out of the steward's way. If you hear a noble's footsteps behind you, move immediately or risk being trampled, physically or socially. There's gossip, of course, the only currency the servants have. Someone swears the chamberlain is sleeping with the lady-in-waiting. Someone else says he's in love with the choir boy. Someone saw the knight with the red beard eat 5 figs and throw up into his own helmet. That one is probably true. When there's a wedding or a feast, it's chaos. 3 times the guests, 10 times the work, and no time for anything but frantic scrubbing and silent praying. The nobles celebrate, you blister. By the end of those nights, you're not even tired. You're hollow. And then there's winter, the worst of it. You work through your own cough, your own fever. You wear the same shift for weeks, layered with scraps. There are days when the water in your bucket freezes before you can get back to the kitchen. You keep going anyway, because if you stop, someone else takes your spot. And because you've been told that suffering without complaint is a virtue, especially for girls like you. You used to have a name. People used to say it. Now you're just girl. And maybe you there. You're not special. You're not a hero. You're just another invisible cog in the castle machine. And yet, the castle runs because of you. Because you get up before the sun. Because you know how to quiet a squeaky hinge with goose grease. Because you remember which bucket is clean and which one holds the mop water. Because you scrub the pans until they shine like coins you'll never hold. No statue will ever be carved for you. No song sung. But if you disappeared tomorrow, the kitchen would fall apart in a week. You don't sleep well. You twitch. You ache. Your dreams are strange and half-formed. Sometimes of green fields, sometimes of boats sailing away, sometimes of nothing at all. You wake with your mouth dry and your arms heavy. Another day begins. Another day exactly like the last. And no one notices. Except maybe Lord Crumbs. You are the spit boy. Congratulations or condolences. It really depends on how much you enjoy rotating slowly in front of open flame while contemplating your life choices. You're somewhere between 8 and 12 years old, small enough to crouch under the hearth, old enough to not cry every time you burn yourself. You are either orphaned, sold, or your parents were very persuasive when it came to convincing you this was an opportunity. Your job is to sit on a stool, if you're lucky enough to have one, beside the great kitchen hearth and turn the spit. All day, slowly, clockwise mostly, until someone tells you otherwise. Sometimes you're told to stop. Sometimes you're told you were turning too fast or too slow, or that you weren't turning it with enough noble dignity. Once, someone accused you of cheekiness because you blink too often. It's hot. Hot in a way that feels unnatural. Like living inside a loaf of bread that's halfway through baking. Your cheeks are constantly flushed. Your hair is always damp. Your tunic, singed at the hem, smells like every type of meat that's ever passed through this kitchen. You used to like the smell of roasting duck. Now it gives you migraines, burns, constant, blisters. everywhere. The kitchen has no sympathy. You're just expected to get better at dodging. If you blister your palm, wrap it in a rag. If your eyebrows singe off, grow new ones. If you faint, try to land somewhere that won't spill anything. You don't get breaks. The meat doesn't care if your arms are tired. The fire doesn't care if you're sweating so hard it's dripping into your eyes. The nobles expect their roast goose to spin at the correct angle and pace, or heads will metaphorically roll, sometimes literally, depending on how drunk the steward is. On special feast days, the spit gets longer. Bigger birds, whole pigs. Once, an entire deer. It took 2 of you to turn it. Your partner had a lazy eye and a mean streak. He'd let go of the crank at random intervals, just to watch you panic. You haven't seen him in a while. Rumour has it he's been reassigned to the kennels. You hope the dogs are treating him fairly. You sit for hours in the same position. Your knees go numb. Your back knots up. One time, your foot fell asleep so hard you thought you'd gone lame. The steward called you dramatic and threw a turnip at your head. The kitchen is chaos. Shouting, boiling, clanging. People running into each other with trays of oysters and jugs of wine. You are the eye of the storm. Nobody thanks you. Nobody remembers you. But if that roast comes out uneven, someone will blame the boy who turned it. When the meat is finally declared done, you help pull it off the spit. Carefully. The fat sizzles. The grease drips. If you flinch, you get scolded. If you hesitate, you get slapped. Then it's on to the next roast. Or the stew. Or the pies. Or the boiling cauldron that smells like fermented onions and despair. You don't really know what time it is, ever. Your entire life is firelight and hunger. Sometimes, if you're lucky, someone throws you a bone, literally. Not a metaphor,